The grand jury is progressing and witnesses are getting ready to testify in the Trump Organization criminal probe. And now the ex-daughter-in-law, the former president's longtime CFO, Alan Weisselberg, Jennifer Weisselberg, had this to say about her involvement in the case. Watch.
Have you been summoned to testify before a grand jury or told to prepare for such testimony?
I anticipate being contacted, but I have not as of yet.
All right, joining me now is MSNBC contributor, former U.S. attorney and senior FBI official, Chuck Rosenberg. Chuck, great to have you back on the show. The Manhattan District Attorney added a former organized crime prosecutor, Mark F. Pomerantz, to its investigation of Trump and his family business. Just as an outside observer, what does that suggest to you about the approach prosecutors are using when you bring in somebody with that background?
Well, Mark has a wonderful background as a prosecutor, well respected in our field. Look, I'm sure they're throwing lots of resources at this, Ayman. Whether they charge or not, and regardless of who they charge, they want to get it right. And so you're going to put together the best team of prosecutors and agents and forensic analysts that you can find. And so, in this case, they brought in an outsider. That's a little bit unusual, but it's not unheard of. And it makes sense to me because, as I said, you want to get it right.
I want to ask you about Alan Weisselberg here for a moment, because he's a bit of a different Trump witness than what we are used to seeing in the past. He was never a spokesperson for the campaign. He was purely a numbers guy. How does that factor into the prosecution strategy when you think of just how institutional he was to the institution?
Sure. Great question. He's a little bit of a different witness than perhaps what the media is used to, but he's not very different from a prosecutor's perspective. I mean, often we rely on insiders. The Trump Organization, we know, is relatively small, at least in terms of personnel. Mr. Weisselberg, as I understand it, has been there a very long time. He's the numbers guy. And so if you want to understand how an organization works and how its money moves and flows, he's the guy to talk to. And so, at least from my perspective, he's a very typical, a very ordinary witness, albeit in a very high-profile investigation.
When you look at the scope of challenges Trump's facing, I want to just go over a few of them for you, because the other legal challenges that he faces include the former president's one-time personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. They're urging a judge to dismiss a lawsuit against them filed by Congressman Benny Thompson and 10 other House Democrats over the Capitol riot. And Trump's lawyer is basically arguing that Trump has absolute immunity from civil lawsuits over his official actions while he was in office. How viable do you think that argument is going to be in a court?
Well, that argument has been tried by Mr. Trump. If you recall, and this may be an obscure reference for some folks, Jean Carroll had sued him for comments on actions that he made and took. And he said in a press conference, he disparaged Ms. Carroll. He made some very ugly comments about her. I think they were untoward and unfair, but claimed that he had absolute immunity because holding press conferences and answering questions from the press are part of his official duties, and that was dismissed. Look, each thing turns on its facts, Ayman. I don't blame him for trying. I mean, that's what people in litigation do. They try, and that's why you have judges to make these determinations. In the end, I don't think it's going to succeed. But your question also underscored another really important difference that I think your viewers probably understand, but let me reiterate. Some of the legal challenges that Mr. Trump faces are civil in nature. Those tend to be about money. Other challenges that he faces are criminal in nature. That tends to be about liberty, the chances that he or someone else could go to jail. And so civil cases are troublesome. There's things that they have to address, but he's not going to jail in a civil lawsuit. In a criminal case, of course, the consequences and the stakes are very different. And Mr. Trump has a whole bunch of fires raging on the legal front, civil and criminal.